Water shutoffs aren't uncommon in the growing cities of Tijuana and Rosarito, which are home to over 1.5 million people. But they're rarely announced beforehand, and they're often isolated to certain neighborhoods after pipes or pumps fail. Earlier this month, however, Tijuana officials announced that it was planning wide-ranging shutoffs for the next 2 months in an attempt to replenish a vital reservoir that is perilously low. Jose Sanchez is a tech worker who lives in the Juarez neighborhood of Tijuana, whose water was shut off this week.
We have to just fill up buckets or those big barrels full of water and just try to live off that for a couple of days.
The shutoffs have been rotating around the city to different neighborhoods as the government tries to spread the burden of water conservation. The goal is for each neighborhood to have their water shut off for a 24-hour period, once every 5 days.
We can manage with not washing dishes, maybe ordering more takeout or taking showers with friends and family like I do, for example.
The vast majority of residents don't drink the water from the tap, but the shutoffs have already impacted the water use habits of Tijuana. Ruben Villavicencio Alvarez, who works as an engineer for the city's water utility, explains that's part of the idea behind the citywide shutoffs.
Nos estamos dando cuenta, la ciudadanía, nos incluimos.
He says that residents are realizing that by making small changes to their lifestyles, like taking shorter showers, the city can make a huge change to its water use. He says it's already seeing results.
Significativo.
But after an especially wet winter, why is Tijuana suddenly low on water? It has to do with where the city's water is coming from. Water is pumped from Mexicali over the mountains to here, El Carrizo Reservoir in the outskirts of Tijuana. It supplies most of the water for Tijuana and Rosarito. Right now, it's at just 15% of capacity.
More than 90% of the water in the coastal zone, and that would be Rosarito and Tijuana and Tecate, comes from the Colorado River.
SDSU professor Paul Ganster has studied water use along the border for decades. The water first crosses into Mexico to the west of Mexicali, where it's used mostly for agriculture, and to reach the reservoir has to be pumped uphill through an aqueduct system over the Sierra Juarez. It's that trip that has left Tijuana dry.
It's a thin lifeline. It's one that is vulnerable to a number of things.
Over the past few months, a series of pump failures has limited the supply of water over the mountains to Tijuana. On top of that, agricultural interests in the Mexicali Valley have upped their consumption of water during the hot, dry summer. For example, this truck is being filled up with 32,000 liters of water for a farm. As a result, the water in the local reservoirs have dropped below a level where water can be efficiently processed.
The normal intake is actually not at the bottom of the reservoir, but up some distance above that in order not to suck in a lot of sediments and so on. So if they don't have water to put into the system, they're stuck.
The water crisis in Baja coincides with the change in government from the conservative PAN party, which had ruled the state for 30 years, to the Senate Morena party, which in a few years has seized power across the country on the promise to crack down on corruption. Morena officials lay the blame for the water shortage on the previous administration, pointing at millions of missing pesos that were supposed to go towards improved infrastructure.
And the infrastructure is still not up to it.
Jose Sanchez, the tech worker who's filling up buckets every few days, says part of the city's candor about the water shortage can be chalked up to not being directly responsible for the current problem.
People are angry at the situation. They're not yet angry at the new government. Maybe a year from now that's going to change. It depends on their tone, depends on how they handle everything.
With Tijuana continuing to grow, water conservation is going to become vital. And if a rare, wet winter can still lead to a shortage, Tijuana has little time to prepare for the West Coast's longer and more frequent droughts as part of our changing climate. In Tijuana, Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.